Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game. I'm Kevin Day and here's Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Two buddies tighter than the race for that coveted 13th spot in the Premier League. Palace were a point ahead with a game in hand. It's questions day, Kieran. First question being, what were the stewards doing at Old Trafford? Just coming in, boys. In you come.
Yes, they're not putting up too much for a scrap, are they?
Yeah, sit yourself down anywhere you want. So we're recording while that's going on. So whether the game happens, we don't know. It is Sunday in our world. It's Monday in yours. Happy Monday. Happy bank holiday if you're in a country with a bank holiday. Before questions, though, Kieran, one very big news story to discuss off the back of our Premier League broadcasting scoop last week. And that BT is looking to sell a stake in its pay TV sports business. And if someone offered enough, Kieran, would they sell the lot?
I think so. Pay TV has never really fit particularly comfortable as far as BT are concerned. They initially got into it as a defensive measure when Sky were taking market share in terms of broadband. So BT's response to that, well, if you're going to try to nick our broadband customers, we will try to nick some of your TV subscription customers. And they spent about 6 or 7 years putting each other's tanks on their lawns and firing off. And that's why the TV rights in both 2014 and 2017 went up by 70% a time. And then they thought, well, this really isn't the smartest thing we've ever done. Why not try to compete on other means, which other than just putting loads of money into football, which goes straight through into players' wages, and we don't actually receive a benefit, because ultimately there is a fixed limit on the number of people who are prepared to pay for TV rights.
Yeah, you say it wasn't an easy fit. A friend of ours is very highly placed in the sports broadcasting industry. Indicates that the BT shareholders all along have been slightly concerned about it because they're quite a cautious bunch and they think that sports broadcasting is quite racy. Is that a fair comment, do you think?
It certainly is risk compared to telephone lines, which are about as dull as ditch water. And any form of utility industry. Well, if you think about gas, electricity, telephone, it tends to be sort of fairly dull. But you're looking at the volume of customers.
That's coming from an accountant, Kieran. That's
indeed.
Does this imply that BT may have been ready to invest in the Super League and now it's not there? They're giving up?
No, I mean, I've spoken to quite a few people with regards to Super League, and the one thing which keeps coming back is we've got absolutely no idea who Super League were planning to sell the rights to.
Really?
There's been talk about some global players, and BT ultimately are a local distributor. So would it have been Disney? Would it have been DAZN? But that doesn't seem to be ticking boxes either. So all very strange with regards to Super League, which, remember, still exists. There are still 3 members in Super League as we speak. Florentino Perez is still saying it's a wonderful thing, and the only reason why it didn't take place because the fans were stupid and didn't understand it.
How does this work, Kieran? If somebody comes in with money, and I presume there are very few people who can afford this, presumably existing broadcasters, do BT look to sell them the Premier League games they have, or are they looking for investment or just to offload a part of the rights package in general?
It could be done in a variety of ways. BT Sport Limited is a separate company from BT. Okay. So what British Telecom could do is to say, we're willing to give somebody a 50% or even a 51% stake in this particular part of the business. There has been talk about potentially ITV coming in for it.
Yes, with free to air.
Free to air.
Yes.
So. And I know from talking to some people connected to UEFA that there is this sort of ongoing dissatisfaction with the fact that the Champions League and the Europa League are behind a paywall, because that has an impact upon UEFA's ability to sell the rights in terms of the senior sponsors of the competition, because they're saying, well, we're looking at the viewing figures that BT are getting, and that you're getting more people tuning into the Antiques Roadshow. So why do you expect us to pay a premium price for this when relatively few people are paying for the product?
The ITV free-to-air one is intriguing because obviously it's something we've all been hankering for a long time, especially older watchers of the sport. But I presume ITV would then make a fortune out of advertisers, wouldn't they? If you had Premier League football at a prime time ITV slot.
Yes, I mean the previous deal that they had, where the rights were shared with BT, effectively allowed ITV to show one match a week live, and then the highlights normally, in the equivalent of a match of the day style program at 10:30, whereas BT then showed the remainder of the matches, and that seemed to work for both parties. So whether BT perhaps bit off more than they could chew by going for the exclusive rights, I think they were trying to increase their market share through taking such an approach. Only time will tell, but I don't think it's been a huge success for BT. Some people have the subscriptions. I think more people have taken up the subscriptions potentially during lockdown because if you are fortunate enough to still have a job and you're working from home and you're not paying for commuting fees and so on, there's evidence that a proportion of the population actually have more money in their pocket than they did a year ago, and things such as live TV is actually quite appealing.
Okay, let's get on with the questions, Kieran, because we do have some crackers. And the first comes from, I'm not implying, by the way, that we have some crackers and some dull ones, like we normally do on an accountant special. But they're all crackers, let's put it this way. James Faulkner asked our first question. And James said, with clubs like Spurs and Arsenal borrowing over £100 million from the Bank of England and then blowing it on new signings rather than paying off bills for new stadia, why aren't all clubs doing this? Is it a risky loan? Or is it only the big six type clubs that can loan this sort of money? Does it ever need to be repaid, or will it forever be just interest only? And surely, he says, this puts the Bank of England on the wrong uns list. It's an issue, Kieran, we have discussed before, but James's question seems to sum up the concerns a lot of us have. Namely, if you're already a rich club, it's very easy to borrow yourself richer.
Yes. The Bank of England CCFF, Commercial Credit Finance Fund, I think it's called, only applies to those companies which, in the words of the Bank of England, make a material contribution to the economy and already had an investment-grade credit score. So this would rule out those clubs that have been historically losing money in the Premier League, which, as we know, is quite a lot of them. Manchester City and Chelsea, for example, wouldn't be able to apply. It also said, interestingly, and I went on to the Bank of England website this morning, that it would not apply if you are what's referred to as a leveraged buyout company. And this is where somebody takes over a company and borrows a huge sum of money to fund that acquisition. So immediately here, we're looking at Manchester United and Burnley, because both of those clubs have been acquired by owners who have effectively mortgaged the club's assets as a means of taking over the entity. So those would be outside. The majority of your revenues have got to come from the UK. Well, that's not an issue. And you've got to have evidence of significant employment, which I think clearly Arsenal and Spurs can tick those boxes. But in my reaction, I think practically every Premier League club would have been able to do so. I think what would have probably been the issue for many clubs is that they wouldn't necessarily have a good credit rating, because not many have been very good at making profits. And I did an analysis of the 5 most profitable clubs in Premier League history, which was Arsenal, Spurs were top, then Arsenal, then Liverpool, Manchester United, and Burnley. But 2 of those would be ruled out because they're leveraged buyouts. Then I went into the Bank of England. Very kindly puts out a spreadsheet with how much everybody's borrowed. Can you imagine the joy in my household when I said to the Baroness, "It's okay, we're not going out tonight with your friends. I've got a new spreadsheet to look at."
Did she go out anyway?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And in this, we've got the Football Association, £175 million, Arsenal 120, Spurs 175. Now, going back to James's question, can they, can they just go and throw this money away? It's a bit like people paying £800 for a roll of wallpaper. Can they just go and waste the money willy-nilly? The important thing to note is that the loans have a maturity date in what's called commercial paper, which is a posh person's, and it's what a financier calls an IOU. It's an IOU where you've got to repay the money within 7 days or 12 months. So my gut reaction is it can't be used for long-term projects such as building a new stadium or spending it on a £50 million centre forward, because the instalments there tend to be sort of spread over a longer period of time.
It's very kind of the Bank of England to offer you marriage-threatening spreadsheets. But is that not confidential information, Kieran? I mean, clearly not, but I would have thought that's the sort of thing that neither the bank nor the person lending the money would want everybody else to know.
Well, I think because it is a Bank of England policy where they are committed to transparency and they don't want to be they don't want to be accused of nepotism, cronyism, or favouritism, they have decided to go through the transparency route. And the list of companies involved are they vary across all sectors of the economy. You've got people like G4S, who are well known for their spectacularly good running of the prison service and other parts of the economy.
Yes, it's amazing how often certain names crop up on research notes for Have I Got News For You, and G4S is one. They've had quite a couple of weeks, to be perfectly honest. We're mainly focusing on the Post Office and Horizon at the moment.
Yes.
Tim Garfoot has a question. And normally, Kieran, you know my instinct for these things. I'm a man of the people. Normally it's quite easy, Waitro's not considering. Normally it's quite easy to tell whether someone supports the club they're asking about. But in Tim's case, I'm not entirely sure. So Tim's question is this: are West Ham the worst run club financially in the Premier League? And if not, why not? Which is a slightly. I'm not sure if he's cross that they won't be because he's a West Ham fan, or cross that they will be because he's a West Ham fan. Tim bases this question on the selling of Sebastian Haller for £25 million less than they paid for him, with the rumour being, God bless rumour, that they have to sell because they can't afford to pay the remaining instalments. Surely this means they basically paid a £20 million loan fee over 2 years, plus wages and commissions, etc. Now that certainly sounds like a bad deal, Kieran. But is it a one-off, or is that a sign of a deeper malaise?
I think that is a spectacularly bad deal. West Ham actually are the seventh biggest loss-making club in Premier League history. So again,
Premier League history, not just history. Now. Wow.
Yeah. That's going back to 1992-93. So I've been through every set of accounts of every club, all 49 clubs that have been in the Premier League, and they came in at a number 7. So my gut reaction, I don't think they are the worst run club. Now, the biggest loss makers are Chelsea and Manchester City.
Really?
But I would argue, by a street, by an absolute street. But I would argue that that's not necessarily badly run. It's just that finances was not a priority. Ultimately, you and I, we're the same. We're football fans, and what do we want to see? We want to see our teams win and potentially get trophies. Chelsea and Manchester City have lost hugely financially, but in terms of trophies, Abramovich and Mansour have delivered. Yeah. So I don't think so. So I had a long, hard think about this and looked at the numbers in detail. And this is the official Price of Football award for the worst run club off the pitch. Step forward, Sunderland.
Oh.
They are the 5th biggest loss makers in Premier League history. If you take a look at the payoffs that they've had to former chief executives, they're quite spectacular. And what have they got for being the 5th biggest loss makers in Premier League history? They've got 3 years in League One, despite for 2 of those years being in receipt of parachute payments. So. I've got friends who are Sunderland fans, and I think we both said we're both old enough to have been at both Roker Park and the stadium, and it's a great day out, and we wish them all the best. But historically, some of the people that have been running your club from a financial point of view have made spectacularly bad decisions on a regular basis.
Yeah, and Man City certainly win titles. We were watching the game in a massive garden yesterday, all safety distant, pub garden, I hasten to add, Kieran, called the Tree House in Croydon. Unfortunately, the Tree House is not a free house. That would have been, somebody quietened the mood at half-time by saying, have you seen this? Pep Guardiola wins a title on average every 28 matches. And we all said that can't be true. And we looked it up, and yes, he does. On average, Pep Guardiola in his career has won a title every 28 matches.
Good grief.
I know, that's a lot more than Palace. Just a silence descended on the assembled Palace fans. And then we thought, suddenly somebody said, well, we're doing all right, 0-0. We could get a point out of this. And then somebody said, well, you shouldn't have said that, should you, 5 minutes later?
No.
Tony McNeary has a question for us. And it's also a lesson for us, Kieran, that we really have to pay attention, and we can't get away with anything because our listeners are listening and they're making notes on their own spreadsheets. Well, I believe he might be merchandising a Price of Football spreadsheet soon. Tony McNeary.
Funny you say that.
Yeah, Tony. It didn't make you laugh, so it wasn't that funny. Tony McNeary says, before Christmas, Kieran told us that Spurs matchday revenues in 2019-20 had exceeded Manchester United's for the first time. But recently, answering another question, Kieran said that both Spurs and Man United's matchday revenues were between 4 and 4.5 million per match. Is this correct?
Yes, both parts of that are correct. In 2019-20, Spurs generated £94.5 million in matchday revenue from 14 Premier League and 7 cup matches, and Manchester United generated £89.8 million in matchday revenue from 14 Premier League and 8 cup matches at home. So therefore, they are both between £4 and £4.5 million per match, but Spurs tends to be a wee bit more. And if you've seen the prices of season tickets at Spurs, my mate Paul, who's my next door neighbour, he's a Spurs season ticket holder, when he shows me, he's silently weeping. But he says, as a football fan, you don't have a choice, really, do you? I mean, it's that horrible sensation that you feel that you're being taken advantage of, but it's the club you love.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Tony. If you listened very carefully, you'll have heard this slight note of umbrage in Kieran's voice. As you pointed out there, he was right on both occasions. I spot it straight away, you see, Tony, because I've been with him for a while. Kieran Richards says, with the current loss of matchday income, there seems to be 2 big incomes for sport at the moment, TV and betting. Would it be possible, theoretically and realistically, for the Premier League and EFL to sell the rights of listing the clubs and fixtures to betting companies? The amount of money currently collected by betting companies, which is then not given to the game, must be enormous. It's a fair point. We've talked about this before. Horse racing does at least make substantial money from betting companies, but historically, football doesn't do that, does it?
Well, it does. There is a company called Football Data Co. Limited, which sells the rights to the fixture list. And if you've ever run a blog or a fanzine, you might have had your fingers burnt by these bunch, because they charge every newspaper. When the fixtures come out, that's charged. And they also sell those rights to the gambling companies. But the amounts involved tend to be relatively low. I mean, the total revenue of Football Data Co. last year was £14 million. So not to be sniffed at, but that covers both the Premier League and the EFL. And I think there is a case for saying that, could they be charging more? But it then goes potentially. There was a legal case which went as far as the EU court between one of the gambling companies and Football Data Co. as to exactly who owns the trademark or the intellectual property with regards to these. So it's it is intriguing stuff. I think what the gambling companies are prepared to pay for is the final decisions. Because sometimes there'll be a disputed goal, or things, how long is extra time, is injury time going to be for you? You can gamble on practically everything. And here, I think Football Data Co. prides itself on having the most accurate information. So when the dodgy goals committee takes place, Football Data Co. are normally the first people to put that out, and that has implications for people who have placed bets. Having said that, we have spoken before about the fact that football individual clubs do get some financial benefit from the gambling industry, but the gambling industry overall makes phenomenal amounts of money. We've spoken before about Bet365 and how successful they are in terms of generating funds. I've said that if we just had a 1% levy on every bet that was placed in terms of football, then that could bring in, I think, £140 million a year, which is 10 times the amount of money which is brought in from Football Data Co. And when I mentioned this to my new best friend Gordo, or former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, to those of you who aren't familiar with our special relationship, he seemed quite keen on that, and has sort of embraced that as well. So that's where we stand at present. So some money is being made, but the amount that Football Data Co. charge to an individual gambling company is pretty small when you think that a 30-second ad on during a Premier League match will cost the gambling companies around about 35 grand from what I've seen in the newspapers.
Yeah, funnily enough, I've been running a book on this week's pod, so I'll now have to pay out all those who said he'd mentioned Gordon Brown between question 4 and 5. That's where the money's going. There's a lot of people went after question 1, but no. So there's two things there. So, I mean, the money that, and I honestly, again, it's one of the reasons I love doing this pod, because I'd honestly never heard of Football Data Co. But so if I'm lucky enough to get a ticket for the Palace Arsenal game in a couple of weeks' time, and when I look at the programme and it's got the fixtures, so Palace have paid Football Data Co. to print the fixtures in their programme. Yeah,
they will pay them a set fee at the start. I think they charge a newspaper. I think it's £3,000 normally for every fixture to be announced. Right. So they're not huge sums, but they think about the number of publications that exist in the country, and it does add up.
And just let me get this straight, but all the money made by Football Data Co. is not going back into football, is it? It's going back into Football Data Co., presumably.
Well, no, because Football Data Co.'s shareholders are the Premier League and the EFL, so it does flow back into the central coffers and is then distributed to clubs on that basis.
Right, I got okay. I generally never heard of them. Amazing. Our next question comes from Jim Wiley, and Jim, it tells us that he's a Kilmarnock fan, and he has a question about their stadium, Rugby Park, being renamed the BBSP Stadium after 150 years of the old name. Can Kieran find out the financial benefit of this to the club? As far as I can see, the owner, Billy Bowie, may have got a great deal out of this, as the renaming didn't go out to tender. Has he got away with one here? Now, I assume, Kieran, the BB in BBSP stands for Billy Bowie.
It does indeed.
Good. I would have said bare balls, but the Manscaped days are over.
Yeah, we've been sacked by Manscaped, haven't we?
We have indeed been sacked, Kieran. That sacked is quite the right word. Hairy sacked now. We can be as... and that bare balls joke is specifically for Wes Manelli, who tweeted to ask if I would stop crowbarring in Gonab jokes. No, Wes, I won't. I'm a boy. But it's an interesting question, though. So Billy Bowie has named the stadium after himself or his company, and it didn't go out to tender. So has indeed he got away with one here, as Jim is asking?
I personally don't think so. And the reason why I say that is multifaceted. First of all, as far as Kilmarnock fans are concerned, it will always be called Rugby Park.
Yes, of course.
So is Billy Bowie going to get any commercial benefit from it? And BBSP stands for Billy Bowie Special Projects, apparently. Billy Bowie is a 71% shareholder of Kilmarnock Football Club. And I've just seen Kilmarnock's accounts. They came out a few days ago. They arrived at Company's House. And I think Kilmarnock are actually a very well-run club. They always tend to break even. But COVID has hit them hard. They reckon that the total cost of COVID is around about £3 million. They've managed to borrow interest-free from the Scottish government, so that's even lower than the Bank of England are lending to Arsenal and Spurs. The fantastic fans group, the Killie Trust, they've supported the club. I think what the fans have been offered, and I think this is similar to what we've seen at Lincoln City, is that if you want to forego your rebate on season tickets, the club will issue you shares instead. I could be wrong on that one. And then when it comes to Mr. Billy Bowie or Bowie, he has put money into the club as well. So I think this is just an alternative vehicle through which money's going in. Who else would have bought the naming rights to Rugby Park? I don't think there would be a huge. I don't think there'd be a huge queue. So I don't actually think that the club has lost out here. Billy Bowie has been a big financial supporter of Kilmarnock Football Club.
He could have called it Billy Bowie's Rugby Park, couldn't he?
Yes, he could. Yeah. BBRP, yeah.
Billy Bowie. And please get in touch if anyone knows whether he's Billy Bowie or Billy Bowie.
That is critical.
It is critical because I was watching the documentary last night. And at one stage, David Bowie said, "Pronounce it how you want." I used to pronounce it David Bowie, which is slightly concerning. Brixton boy, of course. We're very proud of him in South London. Jack Eustace. As a West Brom fan, says Jack, I was gutted when we sold academy prospect Louis Barry to Barcelona in 2019. Although you can never grumble about selling a player to one of the world's largest clubs, there are still questions around the deal. Barca only had to pay £235,000 for him, which I believe, says Jack, was set by FIFA. However, it appears we still haven't received a penny for him. If that is true, why not?
Right. I don't think West Brom were forced to sell him. It was a case of Louis Barry joined West Bromwich Albion's academy at the age of 6, and he stayed there until he was 15. He was then offered professional terms and decided, I've also got an offer from Barcelona Football Club. And, I think that was clearly very attractive to him. And he therefore went to Barcelona. Now, under FIFA regulations, if you are moving from one country to another below, I think it's the age of 23 or 24, you are entitled to fixed compensation. So the tariff here was £235,000. Barcelona should have paid it. That's the end, then the short of it. But for whatever reason, and we know that Barcelona have huge problems, and this could be a classic case of the big guy picking on the little guy by just, if anybody's ever had the misfortune to have to deal with big retailers or large organisations in terms of trying to get money out of them after you supplied them with goods, they can be really awkward. My understanding is that this has been reported to FIFA. The EFL, who West Bromwich Albion were an EFL club at the time, they were also supporting West Brom. I think what's really great with West Bromwich Albion fans is that Louis Barry didn't settle particularly in Barcelona, and they've then sold him to Aston Villa for somewhere in the region of $850,000, which could go up to £3 million based on appearances and achieving certain goals. So, we don't know whether Villa have paid or not, but presumably they would normally expect them to pay a deposit. So it looks like Barcelona have made money out of the sale and not paid any money across in respect of the purchase, which, if so, it is absolutely shabby practice.
I have to say I love the I get it takes me about 3 days, Kieran, if I'm away. It takes me 3 days to start missing South London. And I love the fact that this lad went from the Black Country to Barcelona, and after a couple of days just went, no, I want to go back. It's his home. It's where he's from. It's where his mates are.
Yeah.
Good for him. It's a wonderful validation, I think, of that part of the world. Hayden Whitehead, excuse me, validation is not the right word, Kieran, but as you know, I've got a hangover, so I'm amazed you got that amount of syllables out of me, to be perfectly honest. Hayden Whitehead says, I love the pod. I'm a long-time listener from the very beginning. Cheers for keeping it going through a tricky year. To be honest, Hayden, it helped keep us going through a tricky year. My question, says Hayden, is around Brexit and the points-based system re-signing players. Would a similar system be in place for bringing in foreign managers? If so, what would be the criteria? And if not, why not? That's a good question, Hayden. And thank you for your kind comments, because we've talked, of course, about what happens post-Brexit about bringing players in, but not mentioned the managers at all.
Yes, because as far as players are concerned, the clubs have to go through what's called a governing body endorsement, which is linked to the number of minutes on the pitch they've had in terms of appearances, the quality of the selling club, and also the FIFA ranking of their domestic country. And I thought, does this apply to managers? And to be fair to the FA, it does have a very comprehensive website. And I'm like a pig in muck when going into small print, as we both know. And it turns out that you do need to have the support, and you do have to satisfy criteria. There are the Football Association has said that there are 5 tiers of country. So that's one of the things that we look at. So if you're the manager or coach of another football club, then they will look at the tier which you're in. So tier 1 would be England, Germany, France, Spain, and Italy. So if Jose Mourinho is he's going for a new job in the Premier League, say the Arsenal job comes up, for example.
Then Palace job, Kieran, we know.
Palace job,
he loves Palace, yeah.
Then that should be relatively straightforward, and then it drops through to tier 5. Tier 5: Serbia, Poland, Slovenia, Colombia, Uruguay, and China are the leagues which are in tier 5. He's also got to have a pro license, so there is a. It's a bit like if you were trying to recruit a doctor. He'd have to have been to medical school and proof of that. If he is, however, an international manager, then he would only be accepted if he is the international manager of a top 50 ranked FIFA nation. So if it was Nepal or Burundi or a country which is lower ranked than that, then it would be more of a challenge, although you can appeal and you have to fill out a form, and it will cost you £5,000 to appeal the verdict.
Oh, interesting. The manager who's most interested in the Palace situation at the moment is Sam Allardyce, not because he'll be our next manager, but he'll be hoping we make another decision like Frank de Boer, so that almost inevitably, after 6 games, we'll have to phone Sam Allardyce up to get us out of trouble. Or indeed Roy Hodgson, which is my prediction, that we go for Frank Lampard, and after 6 games, Frank realises he's made a terrible mistake and we get Roy back. And talking of managers, Manny Alam, for our penultimate question, Manny Alam says that my question is around the wider impact of the pandemic on transfers, specifically Jurgen Klopp saying COVID made it unlikely he could sign a centre-back, although he still found ways of signing Thiago and Jota. How much has it had an impact on Liverpool and the rest, or is it just an excuse not to sign players?
The COVID has had a huge impact on every club. I mean, Liverpool announced losses of £46 billion, which is quite modest by Premier League standards. I think the Liverpool ownership model is very much geared towards trying to break even on a day-to-day basis, making some profits from a big sale, if not every year, but perhaps 2 in every 3 years. So certainly they made an absolute fortune from Coutinho, Suarez, Sterling, and then for a while they became Bournemouth's feeder club, and were selling players there, and they made a lot of money out of Bournemouth. But that has dried up over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. So I think actually that part of the reason why Liverpool perhaps haven't spent as much money as some fans would have liked is because they've not been selling players to the same extent, and they've tended to sort of have a one out, one in broad policy, not in a single season, but over a slightly longer period of time. There's no doubt that FSG do view Liverpool as a cash cow, and that is significantly different from the approach that we have seen at Chelsea and Manchester City, where the focus has always been on making sure that the manager is given to a reasonable extent, fairly unlimited funds in order to build up the quality of the squad, because the focus there, as I mentioned to you earlier, I think it was about one of our first or second questions, was winning trophies is all what it's about, and the financial consequences, provided they have kept within financial fair play. And there could be a story breaking on our Thursday show with regards to that. Then they're quite happy to carry on.
Oh, you little tease.
I've been watching you and your how to be a broadcaster and these things.
It's a relatively short pod this week, Kieran, because you and I are good trade unionists, and we're not doing a full hour on a bank holiday Monday. As we said to Guy, not unless we're going at double time for the second half hour. That noise you can hear in the background is Ali trying to be quiet. She's getting her second biggest toolkit out.
Lordy.
I know, she has 3 toolkits, which is 3 toolkits more than I have. I know, if I'm the one who gets the candles and the lush in this relationship, she gets screwdrivers. Quentin Soldan has our last question this bank holiday. Quentin says, is there any model where a company or individual could buy a Premier League team and realistically expect to turn a profit?
Yes. First of all, you could be Burnley Football Club, which I've said on more than one occasion is, in my view, the best run club financially in football, as far as the Premier League is concerned.
That was before the takeover as well. You're talking about. You're talking historically, yeah.
Yeah, and I mentioned the most profitable clubs earlier. Well, Burnley are in the top 5, and they will be a surprise entry, I think, if people had to name them. I don't think people would normally expect that.
Kieran, can I just stop you there? Because it did. I almost thought you'd made a mistake earlier on when you said Burnley top. It kind of went by me a little bit. So that's. I think on behalf of Burnley fans, I should stop you there and say that is a quiet surprise, but hats off to them.
Yeah, the previous owners before Alan Pace and ALK came in, they didn't put a bean into the club. They ran it as a really tight unit. I've seen details about the Burnley cost control approach, and I'm aware of their cap and collar when it comes to wages, and that Burnley do have an identity in terms of the players they recruit, in terms of the players' expectations, and they've always said if a bigger club comes in, we will allow you to leave, but we're not going to break our wage structure for anyone, and that works. And Burnley are I think a testament that clubs can be run on a break-even model and cope fairly well. Are there other clubs? Well, again, domestically, I know Spurs lost money last year due to COVID, but under normal circumstances, Spurs' wage control is sometimes down in the less than 40%. Remember, they don't ever have to worry about paying out trophy bonuses to players, so they've got a fairly good cost control model there. So they have been very successful under Daniel Levy. I know that he winds some Spurs fans up because they feel that it's a lack of ambition. And then if we take a look at some of the American owners, why have they been successful is because they are very much concentrating not on bringing in extra money, but controlling costs. And this is spectacularly dull stuff, but it works. Profit is ultimately revenue less costs. If revenues are a bit flaky, if they're a bit volatile, then you have a wage system which can flex with that, and you set a limit and you keep to it.
In the old days, Kieran, if you'd said cap and collar, I would have gone straight into Manscaped. But what? I've never heard you use that expression before in terms of a football club. So is that a technical term? Cap is collar something that I should know about?
Well, it's certainly an issue for those people that have been saying, should we move to an NFL style of distribution and wage control in football? The reason why the NFL is successful is that it's closed leagues, which of course is an anathema to us. But to stop clubs from saying, well, if we've got a closed league and we never have to worry about relegation, why don't you go and get 12 blokes off a park, pay them £100 a week and play them in the NFL? So the way that the NFL works is that if your wages paid are below 85% of the wage cap, you actually have to pay a tax. And this makes the NFL more competitive. And it is actually quite an interesting system. I don't think it would work in football because of the promotion and relegation. But when it comes to Burnley, my understanding is that part of the ethos of the club is no fancy Dans. We will all pay you within a range of your monthly pay, and nobody's getting a huge amount more than the others. But if you do break into the first team squad, you'll be not too far behind the best paid people as well.
Well, it makes for a healthier dressing room atmosphere, I imagine, as well. Thank you, Kieran. As ever, thank you to everyone who has become a patron of the pod via our Patreon site, including Jack Freeman, Matt Seaman and James Ranson. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to our always free-to-air podcast, go to patreon.com/Price Football. If you have any questions whatsoever about any aspect of football finance, it's questions@priceoffootball.com. You're going to have to listen on Thursday now after Kieran's teased us with that Liverpool story, and I shall hand you over to Kieran to say his traditional farewell.
Well, I'd like to abandon my traditional farewell. It is Kevin Day's 60th birthday, and I would just like to wish you a fantastic day with Ali, with Ed, and to say that it's been an absolute honour to work with you, and I look forward to another 60 years of the Price of Football.
Well, that's very kind of you, Kieran. I've spent the last 5 years trying to hide my true age from everybody. It didn't help. I got a lovely, delightful message from Roy Hodgson, which, of course, one of my mates had to share with every person he'd ever met in his life. It didn't help at half-time yesterday when there was a lingering camera shot of a 60th birthday message on the scoreboard, which is that everybody in the pub could see. And also some bastard has undoctored my Wikipedia page. Someone's gone on there and put my true age on it, and now so I'm just trying to accept it with good grace, Kieran, and tell everybody that I'm just worried, Kieran. I look so young that I try using my free travel pass, people are going to stop me and say, "Put that back, Sonny." But that's very kind of you to say so, Kieran. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. It's a pleasure. I'm going to go now before I get emotional. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.